Spongebob Squarepants. I already went over the show as a whole back in my review for Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, but I didn't go into much detail about any particular episode since it didn't warrant it. However, this time around, the popular episode Sleepy Time, where Spongebob visits other people's dreams, is pretty much the central focus of this game. License-based games for TV shows usually either follow events based on their movies, are a collection of episodes to play through, or are completely original with a slight chance of relating back to the source material, if they're lucky. And even though this episode is one of the most popular ones, it's rare and surprising to see a whole game dedicated to a single episode's concept, especially since it was hardly explored outside of 2 episodes and having a level in Battle for Bikini Bottom.
Hey everyone, Michael from I Don't Have a Nose here, and I'll be helping out Frozen today with reviewing the creature from the Krusty Krab.
Much as I like early SpongeBob episodes, I feel as though it's one of those shows that's long outstayed its welcome, and had passed its heyday even by the time of this game's release. I'm not sure what the overall fan consensus is, but for me personally, it's sadly one of several shows I had fond memories of as a kid, whose reputation has been tarnished by its longevity. That said, my only experience with SpongeBob games prior to this was the movie game, released only 2 years earlier, which I recall as being surprisingly decent, so I still had high expectations for this game nonetheless.
So, with that in mind, today, me as well as my friend, I Don't Have a Nose, will be looking over Spongebob Squarepants' creature from the Krusty Krab and see just how well taking a single episode's concept holds up. The story takes place pretty much entirely within the dreams of SpongeBob, Patrick, and Plankton. SpongeBob's dreams are within a hardcore and gritty racing rally and inside of the Alaskan bullworm, while Patrick's has him take the form of Starfish Man in a superhero world, and Plankton's involves running away from a giant Krabby Patty, as well as chasing it after turning gigantic. These separate dreams take up a majority of the game, with 2 arcs being the first dream, then a continuation into their next dreams. The third and final arc combines all of their dreams, which is pretty much what the box art is about, and is also the only time where a dream from the show is actually referenced. I will give points for originality for most of the dreams, but there is still more to this.
After SpongeBob and Patrick get Plankton back to his normal size, they're transported to a manifestation of their nocturnal subconsciousness by a Krabby Patty. It's revealed that all 3 of them had eaten a Krabby Patty, or at least part of one, before sleeping, resulting in their dreams being altered due to its chemical composition. Okay, I know this is SpongeBob, but what on earth is going on? The Krabby Patty reveals that it's the very same Krabby Patty that they ate, and now they must race to catch it to restore their consciousness, which would then cause the losers to be stuck in an endless sleep.
Well, this got dark fast.
And it's still not done yet somehow. Depending on who wins the race, they'll get some form of aftermath, with SpongeBob waking up going to work at the Krusty Krab, Patrick celebrating at the Krusty Krab for winning the race, I'm assuming, and Plankton becomes the owner of the biggest Krabby Patty franchise in the world. Yes, this does mean that there are multiple endings. Except not really, because at the end of these, there is some nod to Gary. Immediately after whatever character's ending, they all wake up one after the other until we see that Gary was the one who dreamed up everything from the beginning. This is also confirmed further by the after credits scene showing Gary being surprised by SpongeBob, Patrick, and Plankton having similar moments to their dreams. This game's story is definitely something.
Yes, something hectic. The episodic nature of the dreams makes most of the game feel rather disjointed, so much so that for a couple of hours, I didn't think it even had much of a story. It's only after Plankton's initial dream sequence that the narrative finally seems to start coming together. Despite that though, the story is actually strangely compelling. How the dreams are interwoven and the additional twist of everything being Gary's dream are well done. However, I am shocked by the lack of some major characters, especially Mr. Krabs. Considering the title of the game, his absence was actually the biggest surprise to me. Not that the game lacks anything because of this.
Everything about this game's story is some of the most chaotic I've ever reviewed, but it's a chaos that's so engaging that you can't really look away from it either. The episodic aspect wouldn't be too bad, especially since dreams starting off separated and then joining together makes sense, if not for something we'll go into later. As for Mr. Krabs being absent, he is an enemy in at least one of the dreams, as well as Larry the Lobster, but I wasn't disappointed by him not having a larger role. If anything, I'm surprised Plankton's family gets a cameo and that Old Man Jenkins has a major role. I never thought we'd see either of them in a game at all, but here they are with Old Man Jenkins inside the Alaskan bullworm of all places. Again, the story's all over the place, but somehow in a good way.
One major thing that this game handles very well is its art style, or rather art styles. Due to each of the dreams being very different in nature, a fair amount of the levels have different visual styles to them. That is until near the end of the game when all of the dreams begin to combine, resulting in one single style being used for them from that point onwards. I really like how this was done, with my personal favourite being the cel-shaded comic book aesthetic of the Starfish Man to the Rescue level. The pop art style really, well, pops.
Yeah, I lost my thesaurus, okay?
The Diesel Dreaming level has another unique style inspired by the works of Ed Roth, where the areas and the characters are more grungy looking, including Gary, Plankton, Patrick, and even Spongebob himself, though only temporarily.
Wait a second, that Patrick model is from an official SpongeBob game? I thought that was just a fan-made model for a game that I don't think I can say out loud, or YouTube might strike me mercilessly with this demonetization hammer. If you know, you know, but with that revelation past us, I want to give equal praise to the music, because if there's one thing SpongeBob games get right, it's their music. For one, the opening is a remix of the original SpongeBob theme, something that surprisingly doesn't happen very often. Alongside that, the different dreams come with different music, and almost every track in the game is fantastic. There are also alternate versions of some tracks depending on whether you're standing still, moving around normally, if you're in battle, or which section of the level you're in. I'm also wanting to give bonus points for the first Plankton dream having a remix of Grass Skirt Chase. It's like it's the suave cousin of Grass Skirt Chase, and I love that. I also want to bring up the loading screens, as they give unique title cards alongside some additional dialogue, adding to the each dream is distinct motif. They're quite nice to look at to pass the time between areas as opposed to just blank screens.
Some more praise can be given to the voice actors, who are mostly the same ones from the show. Granted, there are a few characters that are voiced, but it's still much appreciated for most of the originals to be here, especially since they do a great job with the roles as usual. The one character with a different voice is Mermaid Man, voiced by Joe Alaskey, one of my personal favourite voice actors who used to voice various Looney Tunes characters. Though Mermaid Man only says one line, which is really only enough time to be considered a cameo.
And yet he still has more lines than Mr. Krabs. I don't think I'll ever get over that.
Throughout the game, you play as SpongeBob, Patrick, and Plankton for their own levels. All three play differently with mostly unique abilities and gameplay styles. SpongeBob mainly roams around areas while platforming and turning cranks and pressing buttons to open up other areas. Within these, he has a spinning attack and a noodle arm attack to defeat enemies. However, the noodle one isn't actually meant for that. Its better use is for SpongeBob to swing himself across platforms on these floating anchors. And given that this is in a dream, you don't even need to question why they're floating. So that works out, because I normally point that kind of thing out. In addition to this, he has a dash which is used for enemies with shields and pushing certain objects. Other gameplay sections for SpongeBob include racing around Bikini Bottom and flying away from Plankton in a makeshift airplane.
Patrick's main gameplay is very similar to SpongeBob's. It involves the same basic platforming and beating bad guys along the way with your ground pound, spin attack, and sprinting. And yet they still insist on giving you instructions on how to perform these moves every time you need to perform them.
Yes, I know what to do! You don't have to keep telling me!
However, the main difference is in the Bluster Puff attack, which allows Patrick to blow away enemies and activate things by blowing into them. Outside of that, Patrick pulls on tabs as opposed to turning cranks, and there are also a couple of levels that see him ride on top of a rocket that constantly moves forwards. This is similar to SpongeBob's airplane sections, with both of them using lasers at some point.
Plankton is the most different out of everyone. One of his dreams is a 2D platformer where he has to run away from a giant Krabby Patty while collecting some blueprints and gears. Ways he can achieve this include using a freeze ray to freeze enemies and jump off of them, as well as using some machinery to advance further. In his other dream, Plankton is extremely large, allowing him to smash buildings and structures. He also obtains the ability to roar and use a laser, again, for destroying obstacles. You can drive around as Plankton as well for the final level, but only if you collect all of the sleepy seeds for him, which we have not explained yet.
Throughout the levels, there are pink and green sleepy seeds, and collecting them unlocks Patrick and Plankton respectively in the final level of the game. There's an on-screen signal for when one is nearby, which flashes faster the closer you are to one. The other collectible is Snooze Z coins, either scattered around the levels, deposited by enemies, or upon completing unique minigames that are within most dreams. Said coins are used at the Jelly Jumble shop to get various extras like concept art, harder minigames, music, and more.
You have the ability to save in the middle of levels at any checkpoint, which not many platformers give the ability to do. This means that if you want or need to play for a little bit, save and come back later for more, you can do that. A lot of platformers usually have some form of autosave in the game anyways, but it's nice being able to do this and make sure you can actually save manually.
I'm glad you're able to save in the middle of levels and on multiple files, because playing for such a long time can be draining. Imagine having to play a whole hour of this without the ability to stop or having to repeat all of it. Well, that's somewhat happened with me in Belly Trouble, where due to a glitch, I couldn't jump on one of the platforms to progress, so I had to load an older save.
It only set me back about 5 or 10 minutes, and it doesn't sound like a lot, but trust me, it felt a lot longer.
The first half of the levels are too long. The first dreams of SpongeBob and Patrick go on for an hour each. I'm assuming the reason why is because every dream is drastically different, so the game is trying to give you enough time to become familiar with them, both aesthetic and gameplay wise, before changing to something else. While it succeeds at this at first, after 15 minutes the effect fades quickly and being in these areas starts to get old, spoiling aspects of both the presentation and gameplay. It just begins to go on and on and on. If there was more stuff to do in them, like with Battle for Bikini Bottom and the movie game, it wouldn't feel as bad.
Indeed, some of the levels are intolerably long. While the returning voice actors are nice to hear, there's more than enough time for you to get repeated lines, which goes from being cool to annoying very fast.
My goodness, you're becoming one of my best pupils. My goodness, you're becoming one of my best pupils. My goodness, you're becoming one of my best pupils.
Yes, I'm becoming one of your best pupils, I get it! You don't have to keep telling me so!
Even the music begins to feel like it drones on, despite the variations on the tracks. Thankfully, the art styles are strong enough to make looking at everything not terrible, but staying any longer would have definitely started to dampen the enjoyment of that as well.
The standard playstyles of gameplay also don't evolve at all for the rest of the game. There's barely any new mechanics or abilities making platforming a bore. The way you fight mob fights are never any different across multiple dreams, making fights feel pointless. Minigames that happen between levels often feel like they're there to drag out the game, and often halt the pace as if there were pit stops. And the Z coins, which are everywhere, are only for extras that you get randomly. You don't even get to choose which items you get, and that's a bigger problem when you notice that you're able to get repeats for stuff you already have. All of this leads to a big feeling of repetition.
What's bizarre is that the second half of the game and all of Plankton's levels aren't like this. They feel much shorter and more varied compared to the other levels, so at the very least they feel as though they're over with quickly. Regardless, you still won't be too incentivized to return for any sleepy seeds you missed on your first playthrough, as the reward of being able to play as Patrick and Plankton for one single level really isn't worth it, even in spite of the bonus alternate endings you can unlock for each character. Our opinions on controls are pretty different, and that's mainly because of how the controls work and other differences between versions. For me, I like the PS2 controls as they work very well, leaving few awkward moments outside of the one glitch I encountered. However, there are some things from the Wii version that I would have liked. The dash feature in the Wii version starts up instantly, while the PS2 version has a build-up, which I feel is unnecessary. The PS2 version also has a glitch where for every even number of times you use it, the startup animation would be skipped and the characters instantly sprint while in their walking animation. The flying and driving sections were also made easier in the Wii version, with the car being faster and the plane having a reticle for the lasers, which are also things I would have liked.
The Wii version uses motion controls and they are not good. For starters, they rely on it far too much for me, because it's even to the point where so much as turning the camera is almost entirely dependent on using the cursor. This just makes me wonder why I can't use the D-pad for that instead, since it's not used for anything during levels where you can control the camera. The flying and driving sections also use motion controls, and they're not bad per se, but the rest of this is actually aggravating. These might just be a controller issue, but the dash is annoying to use consistently. While the dash starts up instantly in the Wii version, using it involves swinging the nunchuck, and if multiple inputs are detected, the dash will instantly stop, which is problematic when some obstacles and enemies can only be bypassed by using this. And don't even get me started with the crank SpongeBob has to deal with. Turning them felt impossible at times, making me frustrated and exhausting trying to do it. Both of these issues happened so often that I had to switch arms at times because of how dysfunctional they felt. Again, it might be a controller issue, but overall, I still very much would prefer a controller. There's also a minigame for the Wii version, where you get to play the music that the game has, but it's literally just play pretend. No notes ever actually appear, you just have to try and just play it, which at that point, why bother?
I'm kind of at war with myself over this game. It's definitely not bad. It controls fairly well, and parts of it are pretty fun to play. It's also a really amusing game. The dialogue is well written, and the voice acting is great as usual. But the drawback for me is the repetitiveness and length of most of the levels. Some of them are unbearably long. They're not too challenging, but that might also be part of the problem. While it's a relief there are very few, if any, difficulty spikes, some levels might not pose enough of a challenge to maintain your interest.
Even so, it's far from terrible, and I personally think this SpongeBob game remains an absorbing experience overall.
If there was more gameplay mechanics in the longer dreams and more worthwhile content in general, I'd find more enjoyment in the game, because most of the stuff this game has is actually really good. The ideas it has seem like a lot of fun, and using the concept of an episode leads to a load of potential. However, the length of the game ruins these aspects because you get the point very early on, and then it just takes forever to get from point A to point B when there's almost no meaningful substance in the middle. As said before, it's not terrible, but I can't help but compare it to other SpongeBob games that do some of this game's stuff a lot better. And since I've done what's known as some of the best SpongeBob games on this channel already, I have a feeling that's going to be a very reoccurring trend with other SpongeBob games, and that kinda scares me. What's going on, my fellow residents? It's me, TheFrozenCavern, and thank you guys for making it to the end of this video. I'd also like to give a very special shout out to I Don't Have a Nose Games for helping me make this video, as it was fun for both of us to work on this video. And not only that, but some of you more than likely already know that I've also done a video with him on his channel in the past for Open Season, so if you want to see that as well as other games that I Don't Have a Nose has done, I'll be sure to leave his channel in the description below. But yep, that's another SpongeBob game under my belt, and this is actually the first SpongeBob game that I've done on the channel that I didn't already play in the past. So I was kinda hoping for better things, but unfortunately that didn't end up being the case for me personally. But at the very least there are other SpongeBob games, two of them at the very least I have played a decent amount, those being Truth or Square and Lights Camera Pants. I'm expecting to like those games about as much as I did in my childhood, so that should be fine. But any other SpongeBob game is a little on the worrying side. But anyways, again, I Don't Have a Nose, this channel will be in the description below, so please make sure to go check them out. And all of my social medias are located in the description as well. My Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Discord are all in the description, and they are always for you guys to be notified on any updates for the channel or any upcoming videos. I also have a Patreon where if you guys become a patron, you can view my videos 1 week in advance as opposed to all the regular viewers. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more, as well as share this video out with your friends and family. But until next video, take care.